Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, the podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is a departure from some of my other guests, as this is my first time that I have had an artist on the podcast. Today's guest is Emma. She also goes by Discombobble online. She's a recent graduate from college with a graphic design degree, and she is now designing Harley-Davidson shirt graphics down in Tampa. So she's not too far from where we are here in Orlando. She creates her own artwork when she has spare time, ranging from original fantasy concepts to various art, and she's just started selling at conventions in Artist Alley, which is how I found you, Emma, because I found you on the Otronicon post when it was up here at the Orlando Science Center.
Yes, I remember that. Lots of fun.
Now, let's start with, how is it designing Harley-Davidson shirts? Because I know that that's like an iconic company. So do you get free range, or do they give you ideas? Like, what happens in that process? Just out of curiosity.
So it's a licensing company. So it's a corporation that owns the license to Harley-Davidson, and for the most part, we have free reign. Obviously, we needed to stick with the Harley-Davidson brand, so I'm not about to go and, draw a jaguar for the shirt, because jaguars don't really have anything to do with Harley-Davidson. So there's a lot of eagles and skulls and badass motorcycles and everything.
Right.
But, yeah, and then I don't know how much you know about Harley-Davidson and how their apparel works, but for every shirt that's created by a licensed company and not Harley-Davidson themselves, every shirt has to have a custom back just for that dealership.
Okay.
So a lot of people who ride Harley-Davidson actually, collect the shirts, so that they can show that they've been all around the world and stuff. So, sometimes dealerships will be like, oh, I want a tattoo otter riding a surfboard with sunglasses, and obviously that exists because I can't just make that up off the top of my head.
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of how it works.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
It sounds similar to, how different Hard Rock cafes have their own shirts and people collect, the Hard Rock Cafe shirts.
Yeah, it's pretty much like that. My job is actually, I design the fronts of the shirts, which are the catalog, which is the shirts that are available to all dealerships that they put the custom art on.
Okay.
So, I'm on that team.
Awesome. Well, thanks for delving into the non-fandom. Well, I guess, people are probably fans of Harley-Davidson.
Yeah, you could probably say it's a fandom.
Yeah, totally different fandom than what I'm used to talking about, but it's an interesting look into it. So, I guess to start off with is, what fandoms are you into?
The first one that comes to mind is Hayao Miyazaki Studio Ghibli films. I'm in love with them. I own most, except for stopping at Ponyo, I own all of them. And then Harry Potter, I started that at a really young age, and I've fallen out of it a little bit, but it's still near and dear to my heart. And the new show Westworld, so those are the top three right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know everyone, well, not everyone, but Miyazaki, even if you don't know who he is, you know some of his movies, or the people that are listening, you guys might not know who Miyazaki is, but you probably have heard of, My Neighbor Totoro, or Kiki's Delivery Service. What was your first Miyazaki movie that you got into?
My Neighbor Totoro. I watched that, I want to say, when I was 3. I was really young because my mom studied abroad in Japan, and so she kind of brought that to me when I was little, and that's how she was, introduced to it. So she brought me into that world, and I just, fell in love. And then it was, Kiki's Delivery Service was next, and then I think it was, Castle in the Sky, and from there it was a uphill journey.
Yes. I remember, I think the first one that I watched was Princess Mononoke, and that Disney had brought it over to the movie theaters when it first came out, and I'm talking, I was in college back then, the year, 2000 or something. And I fell in love with Princess Mononoke, and then they brought Spirited Away over, and then from that point, I started going back and watching, like, Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro, Castle in the Sky, and same with you. I mean, it's a spiral. You get sucked in.
I mean, his films are beautiful just in the animation alone, and then you add, like, rich stories that he interprets normally from other sources. Like, I don't know if you know, Howl's Moving Castle is actually a book.
It is.
Yeah, which is a really good book, so if you haven't read it, I recommend it. Oh, I was going to say, it's funny you mentioned Mononoke, because for the longest time, I would not watch it, because actually, Cartoon Network started playing it, and I think I was pretty young, because I'm only 23, so I think it was maybe 10, and I flipped it on the TV to Cartoon Network, and it was that scene where she's, like, getting consumed by the, was it the boar's body?
Right.
And I was just so horrified as a 10-year-old. I was like, I can never, ever watch this. And so I didn't end up watching it until I was, like, 16, because that horror resided in my memories.
Right. It's not like it's not like Totoro or Kiki. I mean, Princess Mononoke is one of those movies where you're like, holy cow! Like, the level of violence that they actually show is such a departure from what is usually in his movies. Yeah,
it's definitely one of his more mature movies, and I mean, most of his movies are, I would say, in the mature zone, but his is like, that one's visually mature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very intense.
Now, do you have a favorite Miyazaki movie, or is that asking too much of you to choose one?
Oh, man. It's difficult because all of his movies are so different, but if there's one, like, my go-to to watch again would probably be Howl's Moving Castle. I love the colors, I love the animation, I really like the main character, Sophie, because I feel like I can relate to her a lot. You know, she's an old woman, you know, in a young girl's body where she's, like, been forced to grow up a little too quickly and kind of pushes herself a little too hard in that regard. So, I don't know, I find that story really relatable, and I love, like, the character development with Hal and how he changes. So, that's probably my go-to one, but it's hard.
It is hard. I mean, my favorite is one of his earliest ones, which is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And I saw the movie on DVD at some point, probably way back, like in mid-2000s. And then I also went over to Japan to do teaching over there. And I found in the English language section of the Japanese bookstore, I found like the 8 manga versions of Nausicaa, and I bought all of them. I think it's almost like $150 or $200 for all 8 of them.
Wow.
But the story is so incredible, and it's so much, like, it's expanded from the 2.5 hour movie that Nausicaa is. I mean, they could have probably done 5 or 6 movies for that. And it's just like Howl's Moving Castle. The story that they adapted from, there's so much more in that book.
I didn't even know that one was based on a book. I'll have to look into that one.
I'm not sure if it's if Nausicaa's based on a book, or if he adapted his story just to make it more detailed and, like, bring life to the world. But it's incredible work.
Yeah, I love the design that went into all the creatures, the bugs, and the forestry and everything. I'm just loving it, just thinking about it.
Yeah, he's one of those things. It's one of the times where, and like, I have kids now, and there's a movie theater here in Orlando, and every year they do a Miyazaki movie in the movie theater. It's a very small independent movie theater. And the first one they got to watch was Kiki's Delivery Service, and they liked that. But then I took them to see Castle in the Sky probably about 4 or 5 months ago, and they fell in love with that to the point where my daughter has a music box that plays the main theme of the movie. And then Amazon, luckily, was doing sales on their Blu-ray DVD sets that they have. and I picked up Totoro, and I think they've probably watched it at least 15 times since I brought it home.
Sounds about right. That's the reaction most people have towards Totoro, at least in my experience. So I don't know if you know this, but Totoro, they were originally owned by Fox, right? I don't know.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they were owned by Fox, and when Totoro was released on VHS with the American dubbed, it's completely different voice actors and everything, and then Disney bought them, and they re-released everything on DVD with new voice actors, and I remember that they changed some of the dialogue to make it more modern, and at that point, I had already had the dialogue memorized for Totoro, and my heart, I just remember it breaking and going, that's not what they're called. They're called dust bunnies because they call them soot sprites in the DVD. They're called dust bunnies in the original VHS.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's little things that really shouldn't matter, but when you have nostalgia clouding your vision.
Oh
it's
yeah.
hard, yeah.
Yeah, everything that I think of nowadays, I'm looking through those rose-colored glasses, so to speak, and there have been times where I've found the old cartoons that I used to watch as a kid. And I watch it now, and I'm like, what was I thinking? How could I like this back then? But, I mean, that's how it was. When you're a kid, you gravitate towards the things that you find, and, at least with Miyazaki, as you grow up, there's always seems to be more. And even though he's not as involved with his movie making anymore, at least there is still a Studio Ghibli producing movies.
Yeah, that is true. And every once in a while, he always says he's out of retirement, but I'll believe it when he's dead. I'll be like, okay, obviously he was retired.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like he's one of those people where even if he did, officially retire, he would still be watching, the creators underneath him and, vetting all the stories that they're going to adapt and stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I can only speak from my perspective as somebody in the creative field, but I can't ever see myself retiring. What am I going to do? Just stop making things?
Right.
Drawing or creating things? It's very hard when your hobby is your job and your job's your hobby. You can't really just stop. So,
right.
I can't see him stopping. But I don't know him personally. What do I know?
What? You don't know him personally?
I know. Maybe.
I wish,
one
right?
Day. Yeah. Maybe in a past life if reincarnation's a thing. And that's why I love his movies so much. I don't know. So,
there you go.
Have you seen his movies, Porco Rosso or Whisper of the Heart? Those are two of his lesser-known movies.
I have not watched those, and I feel ashamed saying that. Porco Rosso, Whisper of the Heart, Grave of the Fireflies, even the Arrietty movie that came out.
I haven't seen that one.
And Wind Rises. I haven't seen any of those.
I haven't seen Arrietty, but Wind Rises was very different. I felt from his it was a lot less fantasy intertwined in it.
What was it about? Just so that way we can talk about that.
It was. I'm trying to remember because it's actually been 2 years since I've seen it, and
it's been a few years.
It honestly didn't leave as big of an impression on me as all his other movies. I think it was during World War II, and it was an aviator designer, and him trying to pretty much achieve his dream to become this great designer. That's all I really remember. I don't know, the story it was interesting. It was a little slower than most of the stuff, but Whisper of the Heart's pretty slow, and so is sometimes Castle in the Sky, but this one I don't know. I don't know what it was about it. It wasn't as catching.
Yeah, that's the one thing when we took our kids to see Castle in the Sky, I forgot how slow the movie was at some points. And I was like, come on, I know there's action, and I know, it picks up, but there are times where it's just dragging.
Yeah.
But, again, you take another movie like Kiki's Delivery Service, which is about 40 minutes less, and it's nonstop with something's going on all the time because they have that shorter time period.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, Miyazaki movies, man, I wish more people were exposed to them, even at the level that they've reached now with there being they're accessible, they're out there, people kind of more so know about him, but it'd be nice if there was like a Miyazaki renaissance.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. And I always forget that there are people out there that don't know what like Spirited Away is, which I know is one of his more well-known ones, because I just work with people and I'm surrounded by people who are as engrossed in it as I am, and then I'll talk to some random person, I'll be like, yeah, like Miyazaki, and they're like, who? And I'm like, oh, well, like My Neighbor Totoro, and they're like, what? And I'm like, oh man, my mind is breaking just a little bit. I forgot you people exist.
Right?
Yeah. How is this possible?
Right, there's somebody I talked to, and I brought up some fandom, and it is one of the more like major or popular ones, and they were like, I've never seen that. I'm like, how could you not see that? It's and I'm probably thinking it's of either Star Wars or Star Trek, and I'm like, Star Trek and Star Wars have been around for almost 50 years or 40 years, and you've never seen anything, and it just, I don't know, like, I've lived in the world so long of reading and watching and writing and going to conventions, and it's hard for me to imagine that there are people out there who haven't gotten into some of, like, the bigger fandoms, or,
yeah.
I know, like, some of the ones like Lord of the Rings or even Game of Thrones, it's not as accessible for some people, like, oh, I don't like fantasy, or, oh, I don't like X, Y, or Z, but there's still people, and it just blows me away.
I work with somebody where I just recently found out that he has never seen Star Wars. And he's older than me. He's like 30, 33, 34, and I'm kind of like, come on, man. I've seen him multiple times. There's no excuse for you, and you're like really involved in like many fandom communities. How can you not like even attempted to watch Star Wars?
Right? It's the same thing with my wife. My wife has never seen any of the Star Wars movies until The Force Awakens came out, and she only went because I was going.
Mind-boggling. With Star Wars, I can say though, like, if you haven't ever seen them and then you try to watch them nowadays, from what I understand, they can sometimes be hard to watch because the special effects aren't, they're a little dated, and then, like, there's so much stuff that now exists that has been inspired by Star Wars that you forget that, like, Star Wars started it. It's almost like the Alien movies, where there's so many now alien movies with the same, like, plot of Alien, and then you watch Alien and you're like, what's the big deal? And it's like, no, you don't understand. This is what started it. This is the birth of all these other movies. It's amazing, and, you know, they don't understand.
Absolutely. I know one of my friends back in high school, he admitted to me that he thought Star Wars was a ripoff of Spaceballs because he grew up with Spaceballs.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I know, it blows me away. I still tell that story to people, and it's mind-boggling to think that somebody grew up with Spaceballs and then they're like, no, it's the Schwartz. It's not the Force. It's the Schwartz.
Wow. I wish I could, like, get into that headspace. I need to see how they see the world now. What else is altered in their perspective? I need to know.
Now, besides Miyazaki, who is epic, and there's so much written about him and talked about him that I could do whole shows just all about Miyazaki. But one of your other major fandoms, especially when your kid, was Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah. I was one of those people that was going around going, I'm Harry Potter's #1 fan. And, I mean, obviously I probably wasn't. There was many others, but, yeah, I was really in deep with that fandom. Because I remember, I actually got it not shortly after it was released, so I guess I could say, like, oh, I was into it before everybody else was, just because my grandma used to go to, like, the new releases bookshelf and just pick out some random thing that she's like, oh, this looks interesting, and send it to me, and that's how I ended up with Harry Potter. Whatever year it was released, I don't remember. I was in first grade, though, which would have been I don't even know how old I was. I was 5, I think, in first grade. So 98-ish, 99, I don't know.
Well, I know we're coming up on 20 years. 20-year anniversary is later this year in May or June.
Yeah. I have to say I have fallen out of it a little bit just because, there's no new books being released. I didn't really get into The Cursed Child. I loved Fantastic Beasts. I thought that was a great movie. So I'm hoping that will reignite my love for Harry Potter, because I still love it.
Right.
I remember playing, like, Harry Potter on the playground, and there'd be too many of us, so we'd have to start making up characters, like Hermione had a sister and things like that, but casting spells at each other and running around and, having the Great War with everybody, because we had, like, 2 playgrounds next to each other, so we'd, like, divide them up. We'd have, like, the Death Eaters on one, and then obviously, like, Hogwarts on another. Anyway, I love Harry Potter. I'd read, like, the books in one day, and then I'd have to, like, not spoil it for my mom, because I'd give her my book, and then,
Now, one of the questions I like to always ask guests who are into the Harry Potter fandom is, which house are you?
I am Ravenclaw.
Ravenclaw! That's another one for the Ravenclaw side. We've had a few Ravenclaws on here. Why do you identify with Ravenclaw?
I guess because I'm pretty analytical and very book-oriented, if that makes sense. Just very academic. I mean, I love school. I've always loved school, and I like all different fields. Like, I ended up in art, but I could have very well ended up doing biology, or I was very interested in math. I was an athlete kind of thing, so I guess that is possibly what makes me Ravenclaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and of course, favorite character in the Harry Potter world?
Well, of course, I have to say Hermione. I know she's probably a lot of people's favorites, but I feel like I can relate to her a lot. She was always very much into studying, as I've just said. I'm very much into studying and learning new things, and I mean, she's just such a strong female character who's grown so much that, I love seeing that in books. She's not mooning over some guy. I mean, her and Ron get together, but, she holds her own and everything.
Absolutely. I know that there's always the funny memes that are going around, and I always enjoy the one where instead of it's like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or Harry Potter Prisoner of Azkaban, it's the one where it's like Hermione Granger and how I saved my 2 friends, or Hermione Granger and how I figured out how to defeat X character. And I always crack up at those because, without Hermione, there wouldn't have been a lot done in the world of Harry Potter.
That's true. She kept it on track for the most part, yeah. I did a watercolor of Hermione, and I made her into a sticker, and I sold out of her super quick at Watrondacon, and I know she's a lot of people's favorite characters, but it was nice to, I was like, yes, fellow Hermione lovers. So.
Absolutely. I mean, you get into, and I've talked about this with other people on other episodes, especially with female characters, and even just merchandise for female characters of any genre. There was always like when The Force Awakens came out, there was a lack of Rey figures. Marvel movies, lack of Black Widow stuff. I think that's always the deficit when these movies come out, is that they lack, like, proper representation, and so it's up to almost like people that do fan art or people that are doing side business or side projects, and to get that representation out there. So, I mean, if I saw a Hermione sticker, I'd be buying it.
There is definitely an underrepresentation in, like, main outlets like toy stores and stuff, and I primarily draw women in my art. I do have some, like, I have a flash piece and stuff, but I really obviously love strong female characters, so I can't help but when I see one, I'm like, oh, I need to draw her, or even if she's not necessarily a strong female character, I'm like, I need to draw her as a strong female character. I need to show how she could or is a badass, and, things like that.
Right, exactly. Now, do you prefer the books or the movies for the world of Harry Potter?
I mean, I prefer the books, but I will say the movies are probably some of the best adaptations I've seen for books into movies. I always say, like, whenever there is a movie adaptation, I'm like, look to Harry Potter. They did a pretty good job of pleasing the fans. The exception would be the sixth movie, which I hated.
Okay.
They did not stick to the book really well, and I love the sixth book. And they made it into this weird, I always joke, like some weird teen romance, and I didn't really understand. They got the love potion thing going on, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Why didn't you just stick to the book? The book's great. You've done it for the past 5, and it worked out fine. Why are you doing this? But
right.
So the books are obviously better because they can fill in so much more detail, there's so much more plot, and there's so many more characters. But I appreciate the movies for doing their best to stick to the book.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things where it's nice, because a lot of the adaptations from, like, book series, the author is not included or, you know, just kept out of it completely. They sell the rights and that's it. They've got the money. And I know, like, one of my favorite book series is, like, the Percy Jackson series. And the author, Rick Riordan, he sold the rights, but he's not involved. And the movies turned out really terrible.
Yeah, weird. Actually, I was talking about that last week, coincidentally. Yeah, weird. How they really didn't stick to the books at all.
Right, and that's one of his things on his frequently asked questions is, you know, why are the movies this way? And he's like, I have no involvement. Like, they purchased the rights to make the movies, and that's it. Like, they don't have to come to me to work on that. And I'm glad that J.K. Rowling was in such a position with the popularity of the series at the time to say, you know what, I'm going to be involved. I'm going to make sure that you're casting people that are not, like, American kids. Because I remember, like, they were talking about somebody for Harry Potter way back in the day. It's like, but he's American. He has no accent. Like, there's nothing.
Yeah. Weird. I didn't hear about that. I'll have to look into that. I'm curious who they were interested in casting then.
Let me look that up. I'm going to check right now.
Okay.
But yeah, with Harry Potter, I'm glad that they were able to get as much into the books as they could. I know a lot of people were disappointed with, you know, lack of certain stories like Hermione Granger's spew, and that came out totally inappropriate. But with the SPEW storyline and the ghosts, like leaving the ghosts out like Peeves or like all the like nearly headless Nick stuff. But
I mean,
yeah,
you have to do that to fit into an hour and a half. The first ones were only like an hour and a half or 2 hour time block. So I find that understandable. I know Hunger Games, I never read the books, but I know people were complaining, like, oh, they left this out and this out. And I was like, I mean, it was a pretty good movie, and, I mean, they seem to get the point across. Like, you can't expect them to fit everything in.
Exactly. And that's one of the things is that it was like, you just got to let some of the stuff go. And I know I had certain friends that just wouldn't. And it's like, dude, just, you know, enjoy that we got a movie out of this and it's this well done instead of what we could have had. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, what Harry Potter does well is really editing. They edited really well, the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then they didn't do something weird like a series of unfortunate events is another one, where they did that weird thing. I don't know if you saw it or if you read the books or anything. They took the first book and they split it up because they combined the movie is the first 3 books, and then they took that first book and they made it the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie.
Okay.
And then they put the next 2 books, like, in between, so they've changed the chronological order. And I was like, why? Again, why did you do that? This now doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't know if they did it so that way, if they didn't want to continue it, then there was a nice little neat ending, and they didn't have to. But I'm like, by doing that, you now ensured that you're not going to continue it? I don't know. It was weird. But now Netflix has theirs out, and I have to check that out. I haven't watched it yet.
I've heard Netflix. The Netflix one is really good. I've never read the books, but I'm interested in watching the Netflix series because of how well received it's been.
I did watch like the first 30 minutes of the first episode or so. The only thing that I have to keep watching it because I'm not going to just like stop on the first episode, but one thing I really liked about the books was it was unique in the sense that it was dark humor for a children's book. It was kind of morbid almost sometimes. And I didn't really get that from the show. It was a little more silly, like shoot, who's playing Count Olaf? I just suddenly blanked on his name. The guy from How I Met Your Mother.
Okay.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, Neil Patrick Harris.
Yes, Neil Patrick Harris. I kept wanting to say Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm like, no, that's a scientist. Wrong Neil.
Wrong Neil.
But anyway, it was kind of more. I mean, he did good from what I saw, but it was still. I don't know. I love dark humor, and maybe I'm again the rose tinted colored glasses, and I'm remembering the books incorrectly, and I should go back and reread those first. I don't know, but I'll give it a shot and see how it goes.
In the Harry Potter world, which book is your favorite?
Okay, let's see. I'll answer this based on the one I've reread the most.
Okay.
Which would be the third one. I think
Prisoner of Azkaban.
Yeah, I think I reread that one maybe 5 or 6 times. Not recently, but like back in middle school and high school. I love. I kind of like how it's separate from the overall arcing plot. It was almost like kind of it was always refreshing to go back and read.
Right.
Yeah, and I love Sirius Black, so you know.
Who doesn't?
And that end scene where it's revealed that it's Peter Pettigrew, and I was like, oh my goodness, mind is blown, and
right.
It was just a good, solid book on its own.
Exactly. That is my favorite book, and I always like it because even though and fair point with you said like it stands apart because there's no Voldemort going on really, but it has so much stuff that it changes the entire rest of the series with all the revelations about Peter, about Sirius, Remus, his parents. I mean, it really turns the series. It starts them down on the more adult narrative that happens in the future books, and it's really nice. Like they're at the age, I think they're 13 in that book in Prisoner. So you're just really starting the whole you're going to become an adult, and all this stuff is starting to happen, and your mind just gets blown with all the stuff that's going on because he's got the Marauders map. And it's like all this stuff just comes out. Like Peter's there and Remus, and it's so wonderful. And it is one of those books where I think I loved everything about the movie. Like the movie translation was almost near perfect. I just hated the werewolf. I hated the CGI that they used for Remus when he transitioned to a werewolf.
I do remember finding that a little peculiar. It was an interesting choice. I would say. It's not how I had pictured him. I don't remember now how I pictured him, but it wasn't. It's like,
I always picture like werewolves like big and furry and bulky, and his was really like wiry and thin and didn't seem to have like shaggy hair.
I don't think it really had any hair.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I was thinking of because I remember watching the Underworld series of movies, and they have like the hairless werewolves, and I always made fun of that. And at the same time, like Harry Potter has like Remus with the hairy or the hairless werewolf kind of look going on.
They were like, that's what you get for making fun of our Underworld werewolves. It was just to spite you.
Exactly. It's all my fault.
The Dementors, though, those were pretty cool.
Yes.
I remember those were. Out.
Yeah, those were like almost spot on to like what you think of in the books.
Yeah, and those were probably the first, I would say, one of the first really not spooky, it's not the word I'm really looking for, but where it's like bone-chilling kind of things that was introduced to the Harry Potter world. I mean, the Basilisk was scary and everything. It was a giant snake, but the Dementors, you just think about them and it's like they suck your soul out, and you're like, oh my goodness. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
It is no good. Dementors are no good, but at least you get to have chocolate.
Yes. Yeah. I like chocolate. I'll take one for the team.
Take one for the team, as long as, you don't lose your soul.
Yeah, that's the tricky part.
Chocolate without losing the soul.
Yeah.
Now, you and I were talking before we started recording, and there's a show that just finished up probably about a month or two ago, I think, and I just finished it myself yesterday. We're recording this February 9th, so I finished it February 8th. Mm-hmm. And that show is on HBO, and it's not Game of Thrones, but it is Westworld, which is based on a movie way back in like the 70s or 80s. And they turned it into this HBO series, and I'm just going to say for myself that I was blown away by it.
Yeah, I was too. Like, first 10 minutes, and I was like, oh man, well, I guess that goes an hour of my life every week. Have to dedicate it to this.
What was it about the first 10 minutes that got you?
I'm trying to remember. I remember being, like, really hooked. Just the scenery was beautiful, and then it was all just very captivating and intriguing. I'm thinking, right. And there was a lot of mystery, I remember, where instantly I was kind of like, okay, what's going on here? So that person's not real? That person's real? Wait, so they're coming on a train? Where are they coming from? Is there a world outside? Is this some kind of apocalypse? Like, I just remember, like, thinking, what is going on with this world? Like, before the plot was even revealed.
Exactly. I know when I was watching it and I would get to the end, it's one of those, I need one more episode. And luckily, like, I had all the episodes to watch at the same time, so I could really, like, binge watch 2, 3, 4 episodes in a row. But I don't know, like, it's hard enough with Game of Thrones waiting the week, going week to week. But this show, I couldn't imagine having to wait a week for a new episode, because it leaves you, like, every episode is like, you need that next episode. You need to know what's going on. You need to know what's happening. And I know that, and I don't want to give spoilers away, but there's an episode, I think it's episode 5 or episode 6, where I sent my friend a voice message, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe what was just revealed.
Yeah, it was awful. Waiting every week. It was probably the worst decision of my life. I wish I had just waited. Okay, I'm obviously exaggerating, but I remember I'd watch it with my boyfriend, and it'd be like Wednesday. I'm like, guess what? He's like, what? I was like, only a couple more days till Westworld. Only like 5 more days, then we can watch it. And he's like, oh my goodness, calm down. I'm like, guess what? It's Saturday. Tomorrow we gotta watch Westworld. Oh my God, it's Sunday. We gotta watch Westworld. He's like, you need to chill out. I'm like, but I need to know. It's the writing in it is amazing, just because they're great at revealing clues and like creating questions for you to want answers to just by 2 characters interacting, and not just saying like, hey, maybe you should wonder about this. Like, hey, look over here. And you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. So the only episode where they kind of, I felt like were a little weak on the writing, just because they were telling a lot instead of showing. And I think that was just because they needed to figure out a way to move the plot along with episode 3. Because I remember I was kind of like, oh man, don't tell me this is, the first 2 episodes were just a fluke. Because it was just very slow, and the writing wasn't up to par with the first 2. So if anybody's gonna watch it, don't let episode 3, like, put you off it.
No, it's just that point where they've got to, like, move characters around and talk and get stuff out there. And it's the same with Game of Thrones. I always say, like, the first few episodes of Game of Thrones is like moving pawns on the chess piece to get everything into position. Mm-hmm. Or it's almost like a roller coaster. It's that part where you're going up to the top, but you really got to have that, like, 20 or 30 seconds to just get there. And that's how some of those episodes tend to play out. And I mean, it is a wild ride, and there are characters where you will see them one way, and then within the next 2 episodes, they will be completely different of how you were thinking about them, like, in an instant. And there were times where I was like, oh, this character, like, this is a great character, I really love this character, and then I'm cursing the character out the next episode, and I can't believe it, like, I can't believe they got me.
Yeah, and
oh my gosh,
their character development in that show is pretty spot on, because I would love to go back and rewatch it, just because Dolores is one of the main characters, and, I mean, how she was in the beginning is, of course, completely different than how she is at the end, not giving away any spoilers, just she really grew just as a person. And then there's Mal, right? Mal was her name. I remember it was kind of weird.
Oh, Maeve.
Maeve, not Mal.
Maeve.
Mal is somebody else. I think I'm thinking of Inception. Anyway, Maeve, she obviously changed a lot and is another character that like became stronger as the series progressed. It's so hard to talk about without ruining like anything, just because so much happened.
Who's your favorite character?
Okay, let me think. I would probably say I really like Dolores. I enjoyed her storyline probably the most, and I was always a little sad when she didn't appear in an episode because they were focusing on someone else.
Right.
I like her journey. I like how she develops, and she's kind of kick-ass towards the end especially, and yeah, I think, I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. I like her relationships with people, too. Everything feels very complex with her.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I know, I was drawn to Dolores right from the beginning, which, I mean, you're supposed to, and that's how it's set up, is you're drawn to Dolores, and you're drawn to Dolores through multiple different characters. And it's just so cool to see her journey. And then on the flip side, you have Maeve, who I really, like, at first I didn't really care for her, but through her story, I really started liking her character. And it's interesting because I remember when Westworld was on, there was a lot of talk about, and similar with Game of Thrones, about, like, you know, you're showing a lot of the women naked, and there's, like, all this violence, and you're just really, you're not building women up and everything. But in the end, like, Westworld, your characters, like, you have these 2 strong female characters who are really driving almost all of the plot, all of the story.
Yeah, and even then, like, the people in power are primarily women in that show. Like, the board, if you're gonna talk about, like, women being represented, the board of directors lady, that's obviously a woman, because I just said lady, but, they have a good, diverse mix of characters in that show.
Yes, they did.
Wide range of representation.
I'm excited to see where they're going to go. I know that we have a long wait for the series. You and I were talking about it off air, how they're going to space it with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, because it's the same viewer demographic, I guess. So.
Right. So we're waiting until 2018, but I went online, and everyone could go online and just type in Westworld Season 2, and you'll find a lot of different opinions and theories about what you might get to see or not see, and you know, I'm going to be right there watching it when it starts back up. Like, that's a not miss show for me.
Yeah, at least we get Stranger Things is coming out this year, I think. And
yes, Halloween, all of it drops. Like, that's going to be one awesome Halloween day or night, depending on when people get to watch it.
Yeah, probably a weekend for me. I'm just gonna watch it all in 2 days.
Oh yeah, like, I think I watched it within, because I was late to it. I had a friend tell me that I needed to watch it. I was like, oh, you know, I don't really watch horror. Like, I'm not a big horror guy. And they're like, oh no, it's not really horror, but you need to check it out. And I think I did it within two or 3 days. I had finished everything, and then I told my wife that she needed to watch it, and she watched it and loved it, and then everyone else, like, around us started watching it. It's I love how things like that just catch fire. Like, something drops, and it just slowly spreads, and then everyone's in love with it.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. And I love Stranger Things because it's it's pretty much like an 8-hour movie. It's not really
Yeah.
a TV show, quite honestly. You can just watch it in one sitting.
Yep. It is, and it's so great. And I love the actors. I know there's a convention here that got canceled called Spooky Empire. It got canceled when the hurricane came, Hurricane Matthew.
Oh.
And then they rescheduled it like a month or two later in December, I think. And originally they had the largest cast gathering of Stranger Things back before the hurricane came. And they were going to be that first convention to have like a Stranger Things cast group. But sadly it got canceled, and then some people couldn't make it when they rescheduled it. But I'm hoping that maybe MegaCon in May or whenever it is, I think it's May.
Yeah.
Maybe get some of the characters, because I want to meet Dustin. Gaten Matarazzo, I believe is his name.
Mm.
He is my favorite character.
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
And it'd be cool if some of the Westworld people hit the convention tour. That would be nice.
I would be really excited for that. I would definitely be trying to get in line to meet them.
Heck yeah. As I said in the introduction, you are my first artist that I'm having on the podcast. I've had people who cosplay, I've had authors, I've had just people who are into different fandoms, but I'm happy to say you're my first artist. And really, like, how did you get into drawing fan art? Is that something that you did when you were younger and you honed your skills, like, in college? Or was it something that you just fell into?
When it comes to fan art, I actually only started doing fan art, let me think. I think I did my first ever piece of fan art maybe a year and a half ago. So really not that long ago, but I did graphic design, so that's all like logo work and things like that. So I didn't really have an opportunity in college to do fan art, and I wanted to be able to sell my art, my illustrations, but I recognized the fact that, hey, if I want to sell at cons, I probably should start doing fan art, but maybe I should. If I want actually people to recognize stuff, sprinkle in my original art in there too, which I do when I sell at cons.
Right.
But the thing is, I had this mentality, and I think a lot of artists who don't do fan art have this mentality where in school we're taught, like, don't do other people's ideas, like, don't do other people's characters, that's wrong, that's stealing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to get kind of past that mental block, thinking, like, no, it's okay. You're just showing your appreciation for this person. Like, you're a fan of the Flash, so draw the Flash. Why not? In your style. It's okay.
Right.
So once I started doing a couple pieces, I was like, oh, man, this is really fun. Because I'm obviously really into this material. I can do my own stuff on the side, which I still do, while also just occasionally sprinkling in, hey, a drawing of a Little Mermaid, because I like mermaids and I like Ariel, so that's kind of how it happened. And then I did MegaCon Tampa, and the rest is history pretty much at this point.
Okay. How do you decide to, like, which characters you're going to draw? Are you drawing characters that you just really enjoy? Are you picking characters that you know are more in, like, the mainstream of people's collective thoughts? What's the process? Like, or do you just sit down and you're like, I'm just going to see what comes out?
It's kind of a mix of everything. Sometimes it is like, oh, I'm watching something or playing something, or my boyfriend's playing something like Overwatch, which I don't play, but he was playing it, and I love the character design. So I'm like, oh, I need to draw these characters right now. And sometimes it is like, oh, wow, I was at MegaCon Tampa, and a lot of people were asking me for Supergirl art. And I don't have anything Supergirl, so maybe I'll just do a quick sketch, or I'll do a piece on that, because obviously that's popular. And even though I'm not a big fan of Supergirl, I like to draw a woman and stuff, so she's a strong woman, and so I'm going to have fun drawing her regardless.
Right.
And then some things are, like, kind of random, where yesterday, for some reason, I had Nurse Joy from Pokemon on the brain. Don't know why, but I sketched her out real quick, because I was like, hey, might as well. Maybe this will become something later. So it's...
Right.
There isn't really an exact formula. And sometimes, like, you'll get into, like, forcing it. Like, oh, but what's gonna sell? What's gonna sell? Or, like, oh, I need to draw something. I need to draw something right now. And that's when I have to, like, take a step back and say, like, maybe just chill for a day or two and then see what kind of flows through the channels, or just do something that's not fan art, just some, I like to do a lot of fantasy concepts and stuff, something like that, which, yeah, that's normally, like, just images I'll see in magazines or around in my environment or at work. Sometimes my work at Harley will give me some ideas, stuff like that.
How does it work, just on a side note? I know that there's several places where if you're an artist or if you're like an inventor or creator, that anything that you draw, because you work under them, like, falls under their, like, they can claim it as theirs. That's not anything that you have to deal with, right?
Are you talking about for my fan art or for my work?
No, for your fan art.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Stuff.
I just, because I mentioned Harley, so I wasn't sure. Because all that's, like, owned by the company, obviously.
Right,
But
right.
when it comes to my fan art, yeah, I mean, I own the art, if that's what you're asking. When it comes to like, the characters, this is where it gets tricky with fan art. So, like, technically, you're not supposed to sell fan art. Technically speaking, it's not really, I guess you could even say, like, legal. Like, if somebody sent me a cease and desist letter, I'd have to cease and desist.
Right.
But, like, when it comes to Artist Alley and stuff, there's kind of, like, an unwritten rule that you can sell fan art. I know sometimes during, like, there's zombie conventions and stuff that the Walking Dead people will be like, no, you can't sell Walking Dead art.
Right.
So, things like that. Did that answer your question?
Okay.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
I know that some places, like, if you say, like, you create something or you come up with an idea while you're at work and you develop that idea, they can, like, people can come back and say, well, oh, you know, you did this while you were at work, and it's because you were at work, it's our thing now. Yeah,
and with my work, like with Harley Davidson, that's exactly how it works. I'm creating art on their time, and so that artwork is theirs. I can't take that art and use it for I can't sell that at cons and stuff, no matter how much, if I'm like, wow, this is a really cool piece of art. No, they own it.
Like, when you're in Artist Alley, like, how is that? Because I went to MegaCon last year, and I'm planning on going to several conventions this year. Like, sometimes I feel bad for the people in Artist Alley because a lot of the times it just seems like you're just sitting there.
Yeah, we are. It is a lot of just sitting there. I think I can only speak from my experience, and I've only done 2 cons. I personally don't really like to leave my table because I know I can sell my art the best, and maybe I'm a control freak. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But I do know other people will, like, get up and walk around and check out the convention and everything. But from my end, I really, even though, yeah, it is a lot of sitting, and it can be kind of disheartening at times because, like, if somebody just kind of glances at your art but keeps walking, or, like, you know, they're at your neighbor's table raving over their art, which is probably very well-deserved raving, and then they kind of don't give you, like...
they don't give you a second glance?
Yeah, you're kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not so good at art kind of thing. But it's really, really rewarding just when people do come and talk to you and, you know, really appreciate your work, or I'm always doing marker sketches and stuff while I'm sitting there, so people will come up and ask me about markers, which... Hey, I could talk an hour on markers. I love markers, or paper, which obviously this podcast isn't about, but I could easily do it. So I'll meet interesting people through that way and everything. And
okay.
So it can be slow, but that's not always a bad thing because it's also very exhausting being behind that table. You know, Friday's not bad, but when you're on your side, you have to remember, like, I probably said, hey, how's it going at least 1,000 times before I've met you.
Exactly.
So my brain's kind of on autopilot, especially by the end of the day. So if you're, like, trying to talk to an artist and they maybe don't seem the friendliest by the end of the day, it's probably just because we're really tired and we're surviving off sandwiches we've packed. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I felt really bad because there was this one guy who bought one of my prints on, like, Saturday, and then he came by on Sunday and was like, oh, you don't remember me? And I'm like, oh man, I'm really sorry. I'm really tired and I've seen a million people today. But like, eventually I did remember him. I was like, oh yeah, you bought this piece and everything. But I just say that because I don't want people to ever take, like, that kind of treatment personally. It's not personal,
Right.
you know.
No, I can't, you know, I went to MegaCon for one day, and by, like, and I got there when it opened, and I left at 5, so it wasn't over yet. I was done. I was tired. I was exhausted. I was grumpy because there's so many people. It's so, like, hard to walk around. I mean, I can't even imagine having to be on the other side of the table where you're almost like you're doing, like, retail sales, essentially, where you're, like, greeting people and talking to people and trying to get them to buy your products, and just having to go through that cycle the whole day. But then you have to do it for the next day, and then the next day, and then you got to clean up your stuff. And I can't imagine it. It just seems like such a long day.
Yeah, I called into work actually the following day of MegaCon Tampa because I got really sick just because I was very dehydrated. I didn't anticipate how dehydrated I was going to get just by doing that because it was my first con, and also I think it was just like talking for 3 days straight with people.
Yep.
I was like, no, I'm dead right now. I'm close to it at least. I guess it's called con crud is what I was told. So. Yeah.
You got the con crud.
I got the con crud hardcore. So I've learned my lesson. Patronicon was not so bad.
So I'm looking at your Store Envy site because you have one and there's awesome stuff on it. And I just have to say that I would probably end up dropping close to $100. Probably about $130 right now. If I had the money and place to display your art, I would snap up some of these prints and, like, watercolor paintings because, you know, that's one of the things I like is every artist is different, but your style, especially with the watercolors, because I haven't seen it as much, because a lot of people do a lot of, like, digital art, but your watercolor paintings are beautiful.
Oh, thanks. Because I work digitally all day at work, like my full-time job, I like to come home and just not work on the computer all the time, do watercolors. They're very distressing for me. And that's the Snow White one is the one I did first with those, where she was actually a complete accident. I was trying to do something completely different, and my hand was not, my brain wasn't connecting to my hand properly. And then she's what emerged, and I was like, oh, happy accident. I'll continue to explore this and see what comes of it. So it's constantly, the style is constantly evolving. I'm working on a Sailor Pluto piece actually right now, seeing what I can do with that. And I like to also like experiment with lots of different media because, to your point, a lot of artists work strictly in digital, and I never understand how you can just contain yourself to that because there's gouache paint, there's acrylic paint, there's pencils, there's markers, there's watercolors, there's like all these different papers, and I don't know, it's a lot of fun to just, it's like experimenting, like a science experiment almost, like what'll happen if I mix this with this, what color happens when I do this with this, you know, what texture emerges, so it's fun.
Yeah, your work is, I love all the different styles because, like, even in just one row, there's like a watercolor painting, there's an awesome print, like of the Evolution print, which I'm looking at, I'm like, that would be awesome, like, if I had a room for my Dungeons and Dragons stuff, because it fits the theme so well, and yet it's just so different than what you're used to seeing. And then you have, like, let's see here, like the Wonder Woman print. I love the style that you did with Wonder Woman. And then the one that really gets me, that stands out the most, and is like the Little Red Riding Hood print. Just because how, like, to me, like, how simple it is, but how much of the story you're seeing in it. And it's so cool.
Oh, thanks. I love hearing these comments. I really appreciate them because I put my soul into that art, and so to hear that, it kind of makes it worthwhile a little bit, even though I'm doing art for myself, you know. It's always nice, especially like at Otronicon. I did this really quick Supergirl sketch, and this is just like stuck with me all this entire month, where it was just, I didn't even have it on display, but they were like, oh, do you have any Supergirl stuff? And it was this probably teenage girl, I don't know, and I was like, oh, well, I have this, and her face just lit up, and I was like, oh my goodness, the sketch maybe took me 30 minutes to do, but this, I don't know, I guess it made her day, and it's nice to know I can do that for someone, even though
Right.
it's so simple to me, you know. But I'm
Yeah.
glad I can give that to people.
You know, it's one of those things that people, there's that talent, and like art is one of those things where some people just can't do it. Like, I can't draw a stick figure. And I admire the people that can just sit down and what comes out of their head is like incredible, like, works of art.
I mean, it's a lot of work, because I obviously didn't come kicking out of the womb drawing. So when I am drawing, and honestly, if you had told me in high school I was gonna go down the path of art, I would have said the same thing. Like, I can't even draw a stick figure, because if you saw some of my early sketchbooks, yeah, you're not ever gonna see any of those sketchbooks. Let me put it that way. But it's just, you got to be really willing to draw those thousands of horrible, awful drawings where you're like, these are never gonna see the light of day, to eventually like get to those good drawings. It's like, you know, chipping away to find the diamond inside, the gem inside. Which, if you watch What's for the Heart, going back to that, that's kind of the theme, the theme of that movie. So it's a lot of hard work. So I always say, like, if you want to draw, you just have to be willing to put the hours in, you know, and have that time to put into it, and really have that drive and passion.
Well, for the people who are listening to the podcast and they want to check out your art or follow you or even throw money at you like I want to do, and don't be surprised if you see my name show up on an order in a couple of weeks, because there's some pieces that I really want, and I just have to be responsible and a responsible adult and make it past like the end of February.
I 100% understand.
But where can people find you? What's the best places for them to follow you on social media or go to your website?
So I'm most active on Instagram, if you're interested in following me on social media, and that's, my handle is Discombobble. And then from there, I mean, you can find me on Tumblr, which again, Discombobble, and then Facebook's Discombobble Arts, because some random company is already called Discombobble, apparently. Yeah, I don't even know what they do, but they've got it, so whatever. But if you're interested in my store envy, it's EmmaLettera.com. So EmmaLettera.com. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, Emma, I mean, I'd have more for you, but I don't have enough time, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, because I know you're working a full 40 hours a week and doing conventions and doing art and everything, so thank you for taking the time to come on and talk to me.
Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.